thought I'd live up to my reputation for being slick. Just ease in behind you. First, this was fun for me. I got to see quite a bit of it backstage. I want to thank you, Mike and Politico, for doing this. Yesterday we had a more sedate version of this that ran all day, you know, where we had people from the Miller Center who did all these oral histories on panels with members of the administration, interviewed by someone who covered me when I was president. And then after they talked to people from the Miller Center, would offload all the oral histories they read to fill in the blanks. So blessedly, you got free of memory and got right into this stuff. I think first I want to say, I don't think anybody could have watched these panels without realizing how incredibly lucky I was to have such good people. And I did, as Bruce said, encourage disagreement. I brought all the younger people into the office in either the first or second week, and I said, look, if anybody ever comes into this office and tells me what you have decided in advance you think I want to hear, you might as well all go home and let me run this place with a computer. Because nobody's going to be right all the time, and you will never be dismissed, demoted, sidelined, silenced for disagreeing with me. And I think everybody knew that was the way it worked. And I said, now, if once we make a decision, if you can't go along with it, then the honorable thing to do is to resign. And if you do that, I will brag on you. And we did have 2 or 3 people resign over welfare reform. And I issued glowing statements about them and their service and their conviction. And I said, you know, they may be right. And one of the most moving things that's happened to me since I left office that has nothing to do with what I do now is going to the Kennedy School at David Ellwood's invitation. And before we started the program to discuss what we were there to discuss, he said, I want to say something. I thought he was dead wrong on the welfare reform thing, and now I think he was right. It did more good than harm by a good long ways. And he explained how, because we had 20,000 companies that were hiring people off welfare, 1 million people, and because we got more money for training and education and housing and transportation, and because I vetoed the bills that wanted to block grant food stamps and medical care, the people who moved from welfare to work were actually slightly less likely to lose their jobs than the population as a whole in the brief recession in 2001. So the most important thing I can say is this is a team effort, and if you have a good team, and people will have to leave, they'll get tired, or they'll have a family emergency, or they'll get a good other job. And we were lucky that right to the very end, people just kept coming in, and we always were able to keep this. I also want to say a special word about Mac. He started this idea that we would all work together as a team. And I had 4 chiefs of staff, each of whom was particularly well suited to do what they did when they came. That was also exceedingly fortunate. But I was, by coincidence, with Bob Rubin a couple of days ago in Arizona, and he told his group of, I think, overwhelmingly Republican people we were talking to, that it was the best decision-making process he was ever involved in, because we didn't pretend that complex things were simple, and we started with a set of objectives and we worked to get it. So I'm grateful for that. And the only things I would like to say is about what happened. And we tried to run our campaign on that. Paul Begala was heavily involved in the campaign as well as in the administration, and he got me to go out there and say I was a comeback kid, and then somebody pointed out I finished second. Rained on my parade. You know, you guys were always raining on my parade. But anyway. And I said, yeah, I did. I finished second. But they thought I was going to finish in single digits. And my opponent, Senator Tsongas, lives 5 miles from the New Hampshire border. And so he beat the living daylights out of me in the first 10 miles of New Hampshire, after which I won. So I said, I did finish second. Let's see how he does when we get to Memphis. As I remember, we got 83% in Memphis or something. I'm always grateful. If I had lost Memphis, I'd have spent the rest of my life with a red face on. On this substance, I just want to say a couple of things. First, when I took office, the distribution of American prosperity looked astonishing like it does now. But not as pronounced. We never had trickle-down economics ever before 1981. That is, we never told the American people we were going to talk really tough and act really weak. That is, we were going to give you whatever you want, spend whatever we wanted, and magically it would all work out and we'd have all the money in the world. And so in the first 8 years of trickle-down economics under President Reagan, we tripled the debt. And then we increased it 150% under President Bush. Then he signed a bill engineered by Leon Panetta as the budget chairman of the House to go back to pay-as-you-go, and I think it raised the gas tax a nickel or something. And it was, I thought, a very brave thing for President Bush to do because the pre-Tea Party Republicans headed by Newt Gingrich were blasting Bush. But he signed it. And it was so bad that he had to get up at the Republican convention and renounce the bill and say he would never do it again, showing how deeply ingrained this trickle-down economics theory is. So I thought my first job was to get rid of it and replace it with a build-out from the middle, invest in growth strategy. And it worked. We reduced the size of government, thanks to computers, to the smallest size since Eisenhower's last year in office. We had 3 surpluses, and the 4th surplus we submitted to Congress when I left. And we reduced, thanks to Al Gore's Reinventing Government initiative, I don't know, tens of thousands of government regulations and all of that. But we had 50% more jobs than were created under President Reagan. It didn't work after then. Trickle-down economics never worked again because people thought the markets, which may be full of Republicans, didn't react well to it, and the employer community didn't. But we had 100 times as many people move from poverty into the middle class. 100 times as many. And if you look at the income distribution channel, the bottom 20% income went up 23.6%, the same as the top 5%. And everybody else below the top 5% did better with our strategy. The next 15% only slightly better than when I was president. But the second 20% a third better, the middle 20% 50% better. The 80th percentile did more than twice as well. And listen to this, the most telling thing of all, the bottom 20% increased their incomes 0.7% in the Reagan years and 23.6% in our time. Now, this shows the importance of policy. We can do this again. The second thing I had to do is re-legitimize government because it always hurts the Democrats since we want to do something if people have no confidence in government. And confidence in government went up a lot, but not until my second term. Indeed, the deficit was going down 3 years before a majority of people said it would. So I think we did do that. The third thing I tried to do was to prepare a world that we would like to live in as Americans when we were no longer the only economic, political, and military superpower. And we did that by first trying to create new networks of cooperation, like the Summit of the Americas and the annual Asia-Pacific Leaders Meeting, which the Chinese ambassador who's been here talked to me about, and expanding NATO, all the things we did. And second, by working on individual countries, our relationship with India, with China, with Turkey, with Ukraine. I'll never forget the agreement I signed with Ukraine and the Russian president saying they would never interfere with the territorial integrity of Ukraine if they gave up their nuclear agreements. But it was worth doing. There are no permanent victories or permanent defeats in politics, so I'm not saying it for that reason. And then we tried to keep big bad things from happening. We didn't always succeed at, but we pretty well did. We did, I think, a good job. I think Wes Clark was brilliant in the Bosnian peace negotiations and as our military commander in the Kosovo conflict. And I still see Kosovar Albanians all over America who would like to write his name in as the president of Kosovo. So, but these things are important. And the relevance they have today is what's happening today is power is even more dispersed, and non-state actors have even more power than they did when terrorism was emerging as a threat in the 90s. But it's still worthwhile to think about it in the same way and to work even harder on building the capacity of states not only to defend themselves, but to provide for their own people. And our assistance programs should be designed to work ourselves out of a job so we can have partners, not people who are totally dependent on us. We also have to be more patient when we can't get our way all the time by next week. One of the encouraging things I've found is that a lot of the Republicans who have won in this last election have said they criticized the president about ISIS, and then when you ask them what they want to do, they basically support what he's trying to do. The reason is they've been really honest in saying, this is not going to be an instantaneous deal. We got to be prepared to pay the price of time here. This is going to be a grinded out deal. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some. We got to believe in the history. We're going to be all right. I feel the same way about Russia, by the way. I think the most important thing that could happen with Russia is for them to redefine what it means to be a great nation. They got a fine military and they've had a lot of energy money. They can go out and buy first-class equipment. They're brave, they're nationalistic. But the male life expectancy is still under 60. They haven't rebuilt their health system. They're using their massive ability with computer technology to hack our computers. They should be building another Silicon Valley. So I think that's relevant to today. The most important thing I would say is it takes on average a country 10 years to regain its equal footing from where it was the day before a financial crash, which occurred on September the 15th, 2008. We have recovered all the jobs we lost about 4 years earlier than a 150-year average. We could do nothing about the income distribution before then except what was done, letting the tax cuts for people and upper income groups expire. But otherwise, there really wasn't much that could be done, never mind the political conflict within the Congress. We had to get back to ground zero. That's where we are now. So as a nation, where we are now that is relevant to what happened then is that we are now in a position to chart our course for the future. Unemployment's under 6%, gasoline's cheap. We are in a different energy position. We rank first or second in the world in every scientific analysis of our capacity to generate electricity from the sun and the wind. We have a great tech network. We've gotten enormous benefits and a real head start in all the biological things that are flowing out of the sequencing of the human genome, which I spent over $3 billion of your tax money on, and which we've already received $180 billion of benefits from. So what I think if I had your job, what I would be looking for, apart from the political angles, is does this idea or that idea or the other idea, does it help us to begin again, to create an economy where we can share the opportunities, share the prosperity, share the responsibilities? And in the world, does it maximize the chances that we can emphasize the positive forces of interdependence and minimize the negative ones? And sometimes little things can have a big impact. I'll just give you one example. When Hillary was Secretary of State, I thought one of the most important things she did was to hire a head of the PEPFAR, who was a wonderful man who had worked for me for several years, And they took 100% of our drug purchases and age drugs to generics. When President Obama took office, 1.7 million people in the world were being kept alive through the PEPFAR program, your tax money. Never mind what we were also contributing to the Global Fund on HTB malaria. We were just talking about just what the Americans did. When Hillary left office, that number was 5.1, 3 times as many for exactly the same tax dollar. You didn't spend any more money. We made it go further. We're going to have to do more of that. Your country now, if you've been watching this Ebola thing unfold, you probably have concluded that if all these countries had good health systems, we wouldn't have had panic at the airports in America. And Nigeria had an Ebola case, and they shut it down in breathtaking fashion by going to 19,000 homes of people they identified could possibly have been exposed, and they shut it down, one case. We're trying to do that now in Rwanda by building them a health system they can afford to run with no foreign assistance by 2020. And for the first time ever, the American medical schools, nursing schools, dental schools, health management school at Yale, hospitals, they're all working for a total overhead of 7%. It's the least expensive, massive project ever undertaken like that. That's the kind of thing our government ought to be doing more of. We get to start again now with our own economy. We have to take the world as we find it. But I still think that we should be trying to build a world of more shared prosperity and opportunity and more shared responsibility where people can have their identities without there having to be a negative reference to someone else. I was glad that the president, when he went to Myanmar, spoke up for the Rohingya Muslims. And I understand why Aung San Suu Kyi can't do it, because she wants to be elected president, and they've never had a democracy. They think those people are interlopers. That's not the way they think, but it should be the way we think, because every time we get a chance to say, you can be Burmese and still have your religion, still have your ethnic background. You can be American and still have your religion or your ethnic background. The diversity of this country, if we can learn to live together, is our greatest asset. And it all begins with being more open, more transparent, and not afraid to have honest, public, fact-based disagreements. So we tried to do all that. Worked out pretty well. And it worked out pretty well because of a lot of you in this room, and I'm very grateful to you for it. Thank you.